I remember the way the fog curled between the trees at night, pale and slow, as if it were alive. The forest was quiet, too quiet, but the silence wasn't empty. Every crack of twig underfoot made my heart twitch, and I could feel the unseen eyes following me, moving just beyond the reach of my flashlight. A faint humming drifted through the darkness, soft at first, almost comforting, then growing sharper, like a distant warning. Shadows danced across the mossy trunks, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing perfectly still among them, half hidden in the mist. The smell of damp earth filled my lungs, and the cold seeped into my bones. I told myself it was just my imagination. I told myself the forest was just empty trees and silence. But then I heard the breath, slow, deliberate, right behind me, and that's when I saw it. The forest was quiet, though the wind carried voices. Soft, broken whispers brushing past my ears. Not mine, not anything I recognized. The pines swayed. A pale fog pressed against the trunks, curling around the roots like slow smoke. Each footstep sank into damp earth, leaving a faint scent of moss and decay. I thought I was alone, the kind of alone that makes your chest ache, makes your breath sharp and shallow. But the rustling didn't match my movements. Shapes flickered in the fog. Quick glances, gone before I could focus. Branches shifted as if something heavier moved between them. But when I turned fully, nothing waited there. The wind whispered again. Not wind, maybe, but words I couldn't place. They lingered, soft and warm, brushing my neck. I felt them settle in the hollow of my spine. The forest floor was uneven, roots clawing at my ankles. Every step seemed to echo behind me, or maybe ahead, or maybe in the air itself, vibrating, pressing into the fog. A shadow stretched across a clearing, pale and too long. It didn't belong to me. I froze. My skin prickled, tasting cold iron and damp bark. I want to call out. A small, choke sound formed in my throat. It died before leaving my lips, and the silence returned, thicker now, almost breathing. Branches scraped each other above me. The movement was deliberate, heavy, almost too measured to be natural. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, in the fog, in the space between the pines. Something brushed against my arm. Not a branch, not a leaf. Something soft, cold, almost liquid. I jerked back, but nothing was there. The fog swirled. Shapes danced just beyond sight. Pale outlines of figures that could have been trees, or people, or neither. Each flicker tugged at my chest, leaving a hollow ache. I walked, but the path seemed endless. The pines whispered, and I could swear they moved closer when I looked away. The air smelled of wet pine needles, of soil, of something darker I couldn't name. A low hum settled in the fog. Not a tune, not music, more like the earth itself was remembering something. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it only grew sharper, sharper and quiet. Every step now was cautious, careful. The fog thickened around my legs, tugging at them, making each movement sluggish. I felt eyes on me, not one pair, but many, watching, waiting. I stopped. A single shadow lingered in the corner of my vision. It didn't move like a human. It didn't breathe. It just waited, pale and patient. The whispers rose again, soft but insistent. I couldn't make words of them, but I could feel them inside my chest, climbing down my throat, resting in my stomach. The forest closed in. The fog and shadows, the whispering wind. I wanted to run, but my feet didn't obey. The hum lingered, vibrating in my bones. Then silence, so complete it pressed on my ears. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, only the faint taste of fear lingering on my tongue. I kept walking, slow, careful steps through the endless trees. Every glance brought shapes that weren't there when I looked fully, and the whispering stayed, always whispering. The night was thick. Mist clung to the trees, curling around the trunks like slow smoke. I could barely see my own hands in front of me. Somewhere ahead, a dim light quivered, a lantern, swinging gently, though no one was in sight. It blinked through the fog, small and pale, but alive. I took a step closer. The ground beneath me was damp, mud sucking at my shoes. Each step made a faint squelch, swallowed almost immediately by the mist. The lantern moved again. A tilt here, a sway there. It didn't feel natural. It didn't belong. I wanted to stop, to turn around, but curiosity pressed on my chest like weight. I moved toward it, slow, careful, afraid to make a sound. The light stretched, warped, edges blurred like I was looking through water. Shadows around it bent, leaning, twisting. Trees reached with long, dark fingers, bending closer with each step I took. A breath of wind carried a smell. Something wet, earthy, rotten, like leaves left to drown. It made my stomach curl. Still, I couldn't look away. The closer I got, the less I saw. The lantern's glow shattered into pieces. Flashes of gold, red, and cold white. Every flicker carved the mist into shapes that weren't there a moment ago. A face? A hand? Or just my mind filling in the dark? I slowed. Soft footsteps, mine? Or another dropped into the hush around me. I froze, holding my breath. The lantern swayed again, back and forth, as if inviting me. I reached out, almost touching it, and then silence. The light snapped away, swallowed by the mist. The lantern vanished. No glow, no shadow, nothing but fog. I stood there, chest tight, ears straining. The mist curled around my legs, damp and cool. A rustle behind me. I turned. Nothing. The air felt heavy, thick with waiting. The forest shifted. Branches tapped like fingers, slow, deliberate. Every movement cast new shadows. I felt watched. The lantern hadn't been just light. It had been a presence. I stumbled forward. The path seemed longer now. The mist seemed to breathe, rising, falling. The ground smelled older, wetter, darker. Each footstep left a mark that the fog quickly devoured. I whispered my own name. It came back, stretched, strange. The words lost in static, as if the night itself didn't want them spoken. Then, just for a moment, I caught it, a shape moving at the edge of my vision. Tall, thin, still partially hidden by the mist. The lantern swung lightly in its hand. Or maybe it floated. I could never tell. And then it was gone. The fog swallowed everything. I was alone. The air tasted cold and hollow. I kept walking. Every tree seemed a little taller. Every shadow a little longer. I could feel the faint hum of something just beyond sight, pressing against my thoughts. The night had returned to stillness. But I knew the lantern hadn't left. It lingered in the mist, waiting for curiosity to wander too far again. I reached the edge of the clearing. The fog thinned, revealing only empty air and pale moonlight. The lantern sway, the shadows stretch. Gone. But in the silence, I could still feel it watching. Always just beyond the light. Always just out of reach. The fire had dwindled to soft embers. The air smelled of wet pine and cold earth. Shadows stretched like long fingers between the trees. I could feel the heat fading from my hands, the wood beneath them black and rough. A hush pressed over the clearing. Even the wind seemed hesitant. Then it began, a low hum, barely more than a breath. It rose and fell in strange waves, like something thinking like my own thoughts, but not mine. The fire trembled. Its orange light wavered and flared, as if startled by the sound. I didn't move. I couldn't. The hum shifted. It wrapped around the trees, wrapped around me. A single leaf fell, scratching the ground softly, but it sounded too loud. I thought I saw a movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow stretching along the trunks, sliding closer. Or maybe it was my imagination. The hum told me otherwise. Smoke curled toward the moon. It smelled faintly of iron, of old stones. I drew my knees closer. The embers sparked, and each spark felt like a heartbeat. Slow, trembling, a snapping branch. Far away, but close enough to pierce the quiet. The hum pulsed with it. Every flicker of fire, every rustle of leaf, it seemed to respond. I tried to whisper, but my voice was swallowed. The hum mirrored my own fear, stretching it thin like fog over the ground. I thought of the trees, each one standing perfectly still. Yet they weren't still. Something inside them was awake, watching, listening. A cold breeze brushed my neck, smelling of moss and damp bark. The hum sharpened, like it had learned my name. My breath caught. I could taste iron in it. Or was it just my pulse? Soft footsteps, or the echo of them. shifted behind me. But when I turned, the clearing remained empty and the fire whispered back, brighter, sharper, warning me without words. I imagined the forest leaning closer, its leaves murmuring secrets in a language older than me. Each shadow seemed alive, curling toward the embers, as if feeding off the fire off my attention. I clenched my fists, felt the rough bark under my palms, the damp earth sucking at my shoes. The hum grew louder, a slow chant, soft as static across the mind. A single ember floated upward, disappearing into the black. I followed it with my eyes, and for a moment the hum paused. Then it resumed, rising in tone, echoing, circling, a chorus of thought and silence. I tried to tell myself it was just the night, just the trees, but the air pressing closer, the shadows breathing against the light. I sat very still. The fire seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the forest. Every crackle a heartbeat, every sigh a whisper. The ground smelled richer, older, like a secret waiting to be found. And the hum, it was all around me now and nowhere. It didn't want anything, but it listened. It always listened. I pressed my hands to my knees. The fire sputtered one last time. A branch fell far away, soft and hollow. And then silence. The forest waited. I could feel it. All of it. The moss, the trunks, the shadows. It was patient, like it had been listening for a long time. And it would wait longer. I breathed slowly, but the hum lingered beneath my ribs, behind my eyes. The fire's glow faded to nothing, and I realized I had never been alone. Not really. The fog had settled thick between the oaks. Night pressed down, heavy and damp. Each step I took sank slightly into the soft earth, muffled by fallen leaves. I paused. A chill wrapped around my neck, lingering too long. Something watched. Between two trees, a pair of pale eyes glowed. They didn't blink. They didn't move. I thought I could breathe, but each inhale felt jagged, thin. Their gaze followed me, shifting just as I did, as if the shadows themselves leaned closer, curious. I blinked. The forest seemed to breathe with me, rustling leaves, a distant hum of wind through branches. Or maybe that hum wasn't the wind at all. The eyes stayed, silently patient, a slow, impossible stillness in the dark. I tried to count my steps, to prove I was moving, but the ground shifted under me, shadows stretching longer than they should. Every tree seemed taller, its roots writhing slightly under pale moonlight. A soft crack, like dry twigs breaking. I spun. Nothing. The eyes, they had grown. Or maybe I had shrunk. The distance between us seemed smaller, though I hadn't moved closer. The air smelled of wet bark and old decay. I pressed my fingers to a tree, rough and cold, tried to anchor myself to something real. A gust swept through, carrying the scent of something metallic, sharp. The eyes didn't flinch. Their pale glow lingered, a quiet accusation, a weight pressing through the dark. I stepped sideways, hoping the movement would break their hold. Nothing changed. Every shadow around me quivered in sympathy with those eyes, like the forest was breathing along with them. I whispered my own name. It sounded alien in my mouth, swallowed by the dense air. No echo, only the soft rustle of leaves that weren't moving. Then, abruptly, they vanished. No blink, no flicker, just gone. A rush of emptiness filled the space they had occupied. I shivered, alone. But even in their absence, I felt them everywhere, hovering at the edge of my vision, nestled in the rustled branches, in the sway of shadows. I moved forward, slow. The ground was uneven, tangled with roots that snagged my shoes. Every step was a question. Every pause, a memory of those glowing eyes. I reached a clearing, mist pulled around my ankles. The moon was pale, spilling over the soft grass. And yet, the feeling didn't lift. A branch snapped behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The night itself seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed. Even my own pulse felt like a whisper, faint and distant. Then, in the quiet, a shadow flickered at the edge of my sight. Not a figure, not solid, just movement. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the glow again, but the air was empty. The forest felt alive now, each leaf and root conspiring in a slow, deliberate rhythm. I pressed my palms to my knees, trying to convince myself I was human, that I was alone. Silence stretched longer than it should. A single owl called in the distance, sharp and fragile. It echoed like a warning, then faded, leaving only the soft, shifting dark. I left the clearing slowly, listening to the subtle pulse of the woods. Every step careful, every breath shallow. The memory of those eyes stayed with me, and I knew, even in their absence, they were still watching. The fog thickened again. The shadows lengthened. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. But I could feel them, always. Somewhere just beyond the pale light. Silent, patient, waiting. The forest smelled damp, earth and moss curling in the chill of late autumn. Fog hung low, brushing my ankles with wet fingers. The trees leaned close, silent, their branches like pale bones in the dim light. I walked slowly. The wind whispered, soft and teasing, threading through the leaves. Every step crunched, small and sharp beneath my boots. I saw it then. A hollow tree, wider than a door, its bark twisted like old rope. A shadow clung inside the opening, dark and patient. Curiosity pulled me closer, though my chest tightened. The hollow smelled of decay and with sap, sour and sticky. I reached in, fingers grazing the rough interior. There were carvings, symbols etched deep into the wood, edges worn smooth by time. They pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat beneath my fingertips. Cold seeped through me, slow and creeping. I pressed harder. The air shifted, heavier, colder, as though it breathed back. A faint rasping came from inside the tree, subtle but undeniable. I froze. It smelled like something wet and hidden, rotten and waiting. The carvings seemed to shimmer in the dim light, their lines twisting into shapes I almost recognized. My hand recoiled, but a part of me wanted to touch them again. A soft hum vibrated through the trunk. I held my breath. The forest outside faded into silence, the fog thickening, swallowing the edges of path. Something moved within the hollow. Soft footsteps? A drag of weight? The sound wasn't quite human, yet it wasn't entirely animal either. I wanted to run, but I couldn't look away from the symbols, their faint glow hypnotic. The cold bit deeper, clawing at my bones. The breathing grew louder, closer. Not from outside, from inside me or the tree, perhaps both. I shivered, fingers trembling, heart thrumming like a drum. I imagined faces pressed against the bark, watching, waiting. A rush of regret passed, sharp and bitter. Why had I reached in? Why had I seen this? The hollow seemed endless, dark and hollow yet alive. A scent of wet earth and decay rose, and I thought I heard whispers, soft, curling around my ears. I stumbled back, boots sinking into moss, fog clinging to my legs. The carvings remained, glowing faintly, patient. The hollow breathed behind them, slow and deliberate. I ran then, the forest swallowing my sound, fog muffling my steps. The tree loomed behind me, silent again, though the cold lingered, sharp and following. Even as I left, I could feel it in my chest, a hollow weight, empty yet full. I didn't stop running, though the memory of that pulsing wood, of that quiet breathing, would follow me long after the forest faded. The fog pressed against my back, as if it wanted me to look again. But I couldn't. I didn't. Only the echo remained, a quiet, soft, and persistent reminder of what I had touched and what had touched me. The fog had already begun when I stepped out of the cabin. It pressed against my skin, cold and damp. The pines stood like pale sentinels, their tops vanishing into the gray. Every breath smelled of wet earth and old leaves. I thought I was alone, but there was a rhythm behind me, soft, almost hesitant. I stopped. The rustling paused, then continued, always matching my pace, just a fraction behind. Shadows moved in the fog. They were taller than trees, stretched thin and trembling. Some had shapes that hinted at human faces. But when I blinked, they were gone. I remembered the stories. Whispers about the forest that watched. Stories I never believed. A snap of a twig. I spun around. Nothing. But the fog had changed. It was thicker now, closer, heavier. It smelled faintly of smoke, like a fire long extinguished. I walked, slower, feeling the damp wrap around my ankles. Something shifted just out of sight. A shape paused, bent in a way that made my stomach twist. I tried to tell myself it was imagination, but the footsteps never stopped. And sometimes they were lighter, almost dancing, circling. I pressed my palms against my face. The cold fog seeped through my fingers. The world blurred. Gray bled into gray. I could see them sometimes, figures leaning closer, their edges soft, their forms wrong. A hand without a wrist, a face stretched too thin. I slowed. The footsteps slowed too. I stopped completely. Then silence. It was thick, like a wet blanket over my ears. I weighted my chest tight, smelling damp moss and fog. I felt eyes. Not on me, but through me. The air vibrated softly, and I knew I was being followed by something that didn't breathe. I turned again. Nothing, but the fog had moved. Shapes had shifted closer, nearer, like they were learning my rhythm. I tried to move. The ground seemed to pull at my feet. Each step was heavier than the last, sinking into wet soil. I heard a whisper, almost a sigh, almost my own voice. It came from all around me. I froze. Gray shapes leaned just beyond vision. They were watching, patient, waiting for a blink, a misstep, a breath too loud. I felt the fog pressing against my face now. It was cold, wet, alive. I could hear the softest hum, like wind through hollow bones. I tried to run, but the world was fog, always fog. My feet splashed through unseen puddles. Every sound echoed back, slower, heavier. I stumbled. A shape brushed against my shoulder. It felt like wet cloth, too soft, too human. I turned, heart hammering, to find nothing. Silence returned, but the forest had changed. Even the air seemed tense, waiting, watching. I kept walking, step by careful step. The shapes remained at the edge of sight, always pale, always wrong. By the time the cabin's lights flickered in the distance, the fog seemed to sigh behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. Gray shapes lingered, watching, always watching. I didn't look back again. The fog swallowed the forest, swallowed everything I thought I knew, and I knew somehow it remembered my every step. The forest was quiet. Fallen leaves lay damp under my boots. The air tasted of cold earth and pine. I noticed it then, a radio, half buried in the moss, humming faintly. I hadn't brought it. I hadn't asked for it. At first, the static was soft. A gentle crackle, like distant rain. Then a name, my name, whispered, not by me. I froze. The fog seemed to thicken around the trees. Each breath felt louder than it should. Another name followed, someone I hadn't seen in years. It came from nowhere, yet filled the space all around me. I crouched, heart thumping. The radio didn't sit in the clearing. It was everywhere, under the roots, behind the bark, curling through the mist. I tried to step back. The leaves resisted with soft crunches underfoot. The voice followed, now louder, insistent, repeating names like they were secrets. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. Or maybe it didn't. I couldn't tell. The air smelled sharper, like ozone before a storm. My skin prickled. I was exposed. The forest, it knew me. I whispered my own name. The radio echoed it back, but twisted, soft and harsh. I wanted to run, feet pressed into the cold earth, yet the forest seemed to stretch farther, folding around me. I crouched low. The hum of the radio pulsed through the soil, through the mist. Names continued, overlapping. A shadow brushed past a tree, too quick, too fluid. I blinked. Nothing. Silence. Then a single word, my mother's name, whispered low, slow, deliberate. I froze mid-step. The fog curled at my ankles. Every rustle became deliberate. Every crackle, in the static a heartbeat. I could feel it then. Not just the forest, not just the air. It was as if the earth itself listened. And it remembered. The radio's hum softened. The names trailed off into nothing. Leaves fell in slow motion. A faint wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of wet pine and distant smoke. I exhaled, but not completely. Half of me stayed caught in the space between what I had heard and what I had imagined. I turned away. Every step I took seemed to echo back at me. Footfalls, light, careful, soft. The mist clung, folding around my shoulders like a cloak. And yet the static lingered. A faint hum behind my ears. A whisper at the edge of thought, as though the forest had spoken, and part of it had stayed. The clearing disappeared behind me. Shadows draped over trees. Names faded into the fog. But some part of me knew they hadn't gone. I walked on, careful not to breathe too loudly. The forest was calm again, yet I felt its gaze, soft and patient. Following every step, the radio waited. Somewhere, everywhere, the air was damp. Fog hung low over the stream, curling around the rocks and roots. My hands brushed the cold, wet soil as I knelt to drink. The water rippled softly beneath my lips. I tasted earth, leaves, something older. A shadow moved across the surface. I froze. At first, I thought it was my reflection, but it wasn't. A pale figure leaned over the water, mirrored in the ripple. It moved differently, fluid, impossible. Its arm reached out toward me, though I was alone. I blinked. The figure didn't. Eyes. I think it had eyes. Pale, wide, unblinking. I wanted to look away. My throat tightened, but I couldn't. The breeze stirred the trees, rustling, whispering over the stream. Leaves brushed my skin. I felt the chill creep up my neck. The reflection shifted again, curling around my own image. Its hand trembled above the water, almost touching mine. I heard a hum, or maybe it was my own heartbeat, slowed and echoing. The air smelled damp, metallic. Mud clung to my fingers. I couldn't move. A soft ripple spread across the water, and it was gone, just like that. I leaned closer, curious despite myself. Only my reflection stared back now. No pale skin, no reaching hand. But the water trembled under its gaze, as if it remembered. I stepped back. Branches scratched against my jacket. Something slid across the bank. Quick, light, too fast to see. The fog thickened. It wrapped the stream in silence, except for the occasional drip from leaves overhead. I heard whispers then, or perhaps it was the stream itself murmuring. I couldn't tell. I touched the water again. It was normal, cold, shallow, holding nothing but the dark sky above. No figure, no arm, nothing, but the air felt heavier. Breath came out in clouds, each exhale shaking my chest. I shivered, pressing my hands to my thighs to hold warmth. Something moved behind me. A shadow, pale and thin, flicked across the trees. I spun. Nothing. Only the stream, smooth and dark. The hum returned, soft beneath the wind. And I thought I felt fingertips brush my shoulder. Cold, wet, unseen. I crouched again by the water. My reflection stared back, familiar and safe. I told myself it was nothing, just imagination. But the water rippled. I held my breath. The reflection was gone once more. The pale figure lingered for a heartbeat, in the curve of the water, in the sway of the reeds. Then it vanished. I stayed there for a long while, listening, watching, waiting for something that would never come. The fog crept closer, swallowing the bank, the trees, the quiet hum. Finally I stood, mud squished between my toes. The stream reflected only the sky now, pale and fading. I walked away slowly. Every step was careful, deliberate, afraid of disturbing something unseen. The branches whispered above, keeping secrets I wasn't meant to hear. When I looked back one last time, the water was still, empty, but the air remained heavy with presence. I didn't drink again, and I didn't return. But sometimes, at night, I swear I can feel that pale hand, just brushing my shoulder in the dark. The air smelled of damp pine. Evening had settled slow and thick, pressing against my skin. I zipped my tent tight, the fabric trembling under my fingers. Shadows leaned in from the tree lean. I told myself it was only the wind, the branches scratching each other like dry fingernails. I lay flat listening. Every breath of air felt loud, hollow inside the canvas. A rustle near the zipper made my chest tighten. At first, I thought a deer, small, careless, brushing past. But then the shadow moved differently. It wasn't just brushing past. It followed me. I froze. Every twitch of my fingers against the sleeping bag had a shadow twin. It pressed closer to the tent wall, mimicking each shift, each shallow breath. The moon was pale, leaking silver through the fabric. I could see its shape stretch, bend, fold, like smoke caught in the corners of my vision. The rustling grew sharper, deliberate. Soft thuds, soft pauses. I realized my own movements were answering it. Even though I wasn't moving at all, I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. I breathed slow, tried to count, but the shadow did not count. It only waited. My ears picked up every detail. The faint scrape of pine needles, a dragging that didn't match my own, the hum of the cold seeping through the tent floor. I whispered to myself, though the words felt absurd. No one is out there. But the shadow shifted again, sliding along the canvas as if it could hear the lie. I pulled the sleeping bag tighter. It rustled, but not like the other rustling. That rustle was heavier, like the earth itself moving just beyond my thin walls. I dared to peek through the mesh. Nothing, only dark, but the shadow had pressed flat, right where my eyes couldn't reach. It mirrored me perfectly. Every tilt of my head, every shallow gasp, I could feel its patience, cold and slow, sinking to the fabric into my bones. I tried to think of the fire I'd left outside. I imagined flames licking the dark, but the heat didn't reach me here. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost weight. The rustling stopped only when I stopped breathing. But even in the silence, I could sense it, a presence curling, stretching, shifting just out of reach. I lay rigid, tracing my own shadow in the dim moonlight. The fabric quivered. Not wind, not animal. Something pressed, soft and intent, waiting for me to move, to break. I closed my eyes. The tent smelled of damp canvas and pine resin. My heart thumped. Too loud, too slow, too awake. At some point I drifted, half in sleep, half in watching. Every creak of the tent was answered by nothing. Every gust of wind became a ghostly echo. Morning came pale and gray. The shadow was gone. The rustling gone. I unzipped the tent carefully. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No tracks, no signs. Only the soft imprint of my own fear lingering in the needles. I left quickly. The memory of the shadow pressed against the fabric stayed with me, folding into every step, like a whisper that would not be left behind. The forest was quiet. A pale morning light filtered through the smoke haze, lingering like a memory. Ash clung to my shoes, soft and brittle. I walked over the remains of the campsite. Charred logs, twisted metal, and blackened tents sagging under their own weight. The air tasted of smoke and something older, something I couldn't name. Footprints appeared in the ashes. Small, delicate, too small for me, yet unmistakable. Each step pressed a stark contrast against the burnt ground, sharp and clear. I paused. My breath trembled in my chest. The quiet had weight. It pressed against my ears, filling the spaces between my thoughts. Something moved. I thought I saw it, just at the edge of the smoke. A shadow, or perhaps the light playing tricks. It was gone before I could confirm. I stepped carefully. The ash shifted underfoot, soft and yielding. I followed the prints, each step heavier than the last, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. There was a rustling behind me, soft, almost polite but insistent. I turned. Nothing. I felt it then, the sensation of being followed. A presence brushing the back of my neck, cold and quiet. I told myself it was my imagination, but the prints in the ash said otherwise. I knelt to inspect them. Tiny toes pressed into black powder. They pointed forward, toward the remnants of the fire. I traced them with my fingers. The ash stuck, delicate as cobwebs, and I recoiled as if it had burned me. The wind whispered through the broken branches. It carried an acrid scent, burnt wood, wet earth, and something sweet underneath. I could not name it. I did not want to. I moved again. The forest seemed to bend toward me, shadows stretching unnaturally, leaning with intent. Each footstep I took, another echoed behind me. Not exactly my steps, smaller, lighter, careful, watching. A log cracked in the distance. I froze. The sound lingered, twisting around me like smoke in a jar. I imagined eyes watching from the blackened hollows, from between the standing trunks. I could almost see them, pale, waiting, patient. The prints ended at a circle of scorched earth. Nothing burned here, only bare ash and the ghost of heat. I knelt again, heart hammering. They had stopped, or perhaps I had arrived too soon. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. I felt it crawl over me, 1,000 tiny fingers brushing my skin. I wanted to run, but the forest had folded around me. I was alone, yet not alone. I whispered into the cold air, my words swallowed before they left my lips. Nothing answered, but the ash shifted under an invisible weight, a small indentation, barely there, as if someone knelt and watched me from shadows. I left the circle slowly. Every footstep made the ash crumble, a soft sigh of warning. The prints had vanished behind me, erased, but the sensation remained. I could still feel them. Small steps following, careful and quiet, brushing just beyond my vision. A patience that waited until I stopped noticing, until I forgot, until I thought I was safe. The sun fell behind the smoke, pale and distant. I did not look back again, yet I knew they would always be there. Footsteps in the ashes, soft, endless, watching. The forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so. A pale light filtered through skeletal branches, casting long, trembling shadows on the leaf-strewn ground. I found the cabin by accident, or maybe it found me. The wood was dark, warped by years, but the windows reflected the gray sky like mirrors. Wind tugged at the roof, and the doors moaned, swinging on rusted hinges. I hesitated. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, old smoke, something sweeter I couldn't name. It clung to my skin as I stepped closer. The ground seemed to soften beneath my boots, and the air was thick, heavy, almost viscous. The door was ajar. I pushed it slowly. It gave a long sigh and swung open wider, as if inviting me in. Inside, the light was dim. Dust motes floated like tiny spirits in the slanting beams. Furniture sat in strained perfection, untouched, but the air carried weight, like the cabin itself was holding its breath. I traced a finger along the wooden table. The surface was rough, yet it felt alive, warm in patches, cool in others. A chair rocked, not enough to fall, just a whisper of motion, as if someone or something had just vacated it. I froze. The wind outside faltered for a heartbeat. Then the door behind me slammed. I jumped. The echo rolled through the room, deep, hollow, final. The handle rattled, but no one was there. I walked further in. Each step made the floorboards groan. The walls seemed to pulse in the corners of my vision. Pictures hung crooked, faces blurred by time, but their eyes felt sharp, following me with patience. A scent rose from the floor. Old pine, mildew, and something acrid, like burnt paper mixed with a faint trace of perfume. It made my chest tighten. I wanted to leave, but something tethered me to the center of the room, where the hearth lay cold and black. I saw scratches on the wall, shallow, deliberate. The marks were old, but wet in their memory, and I imagined them moving under the surface, stretching, shifting, whispering regrets that weren't mine. A window rattled. Outside, branches scraped the siding. Inside, the shadows leaned toward me, not threatening, but knowing things I couldn't see. I ran a hand along the wall. It quivered under my touch. I noticed the furniture again, every item perfectly arranged. A bowl what looked like dried fruit, a stack of newspapers with faded headlines, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, as if someone might return at any moment. The air grew warmer, heavy, and the smell of perfume lingered longer, clinging to my clothes, wrapping around my neck like soft fingers. I shivered. I approached the bed. The quilt felt almost alive. I lifted the edge. Nothing, but the weight in the room pressed closer, like the walls themselves were breathing toward me. I turned. The door hadn't moved since it slammed, but now it hummed, a low vibration in the wood, soft, endless, resonating in my chest. I felt dizzy. The shadows at the corners seemed to drift, almost liquid, and I realized I was not alone. I whispered, though I didn't know why. "Who's there?" No answer, only the hum, and the smell of pine, mildew, and old perfume thickening. I tried to leave. The handle shook, but the door stayed shut. Panic seeped in slowly. My breath came in shallow sips. I could feel a presence behind me, close enough to press against my back. Yet I dared not turn. The room shifted. I swear the walls leaned inward. The chair rocked again. The quilt moved, the pattern curling like a finger reaching. I sank to the floor, though it smelled faintly of smoke and dust. I pressed my ear to the boards. A faint heartbeat pulsed beneath, or was it mine echoing too loudly? I couldn't tell. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time bent. The cabin whispered my regrets, the ones I had buried so deep that even I had forgotten. Eventually, the air thinned. The hum softened to silence. I dared to lift my head. The light had dimmed further, the sun hidden by thick clouds. The door creaked slightly, just enough for me to see the pale strip of gray outside. I didn't move. I didn't breathe loudly. I just waited, feeling the cabin exhale. The memory of it, of the scratches, the quilt, the scent, would follow me for days. And when I finally pushed the door open, the wind welcomed me back. Outside, the forest was quiet again. But I knew, somewhere in the shadows behind me, the cabin waited, and it remembered me too. The night was heavy. Mist curled around the river like smoke, soft and cold against my skin. The wooden planks beneath my feet groaned, bending slightly with every step. I paused, listening. The wind was thin, brushing past the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves. Somewhere far away, water gurgled over stones. Closer, the bridge whispered under my weight. Ahead, the shadow waited. It wasn't mine. It hadn't been mine since I stepped onto the first plank. It lingered just beyond the weak glow of my flashlight, a darker shape, bending with the darkness, shifting in ways I couldn't name. My chest tightened. The cold seeped deeper, brushing my ribs like fingers. I wanted to call out. My voice didn't rise. Only the faint hum of the river reached me, a distant reminder I was still alive. The shadow moved, slow, deliberate. It didn't walk. It glided, or maybe slid, without bending the planks beneath it. A pulse of fear passed through me, quiet, insistent. It felt like the dark itself had weight, pressing down on my shoulders. The boards creaked again, a rhythm I could barely follow, soft and uneven. I imagined my own reflection in the water, pale and broken by ripples. But the shadow didn't mirror me. It was separate, aware, watching. I took another step. The air smelled of wet wood and cold moss. My fingers brushed the rope railing, rough and fraying. Some instinct made me cling to it. But the shadow didn't reach for anything. It just waited, patient. A rustling came from the trees behind me. Leaves shivered in a dry sigh. I froze. The wind shifted. The shadow leaned toward the far end of the bridge. Not fast, not frantic. It moved with purpose. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, loud, echoing. Each plank whispered my weight, each step a confession. I didn't look down, but I felt the water far beneath, cold and endless, pulling at my senses. Then it slipped. One moment it lingered. The next it was gone. No sound, no splash, nothing but the faint hum of the river and the fog curling thicker around me. I exhaled, shallow, barely moving. The bridge groaned under my shifting weight. I should have run, but I didn't. I couldn't let a breeze pass, carrying something metallic. The shadow, or whatever it had been, left a trace. I sensed it before I saw it. Absence in the air, a void that pressed where warmth should be. The wooden board beneath me felt colder. The railing trembled slightly. I reached the center of the bridge. The fog seemed alive, curling around my ankles, damp and slow. Everything was muted except the hum of the water. A soft, persistent awareness lingered in the corner of my mind. I tried to tell myself it was over. The shadow had gone. Maybe it had never been real. But the air smelled faintly of smoke, though no fire burned. A thin vibration ran along the bridge. I shivered, and the mist clung tighter to my skin. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I walked to the far end, step by careful step, and each groan of the board sounded like a whispered warning. When I reached solid ground again, the fog thinned. The trees sighed in relief, or maybe in acknowledgement. The bridge was behind me, empty, silent. Yet even now, when the wind presses against my window, I feel it. A weight of shadow, patient waiting. Not moving. Not gone. Only watching. The night was thick with fog. The kind that clings to your skin and seeps between your fingers. I was walking where the trees grew tight and tall, the moon barely reaching the forest floor. Tiny lights flickered ahead. Not stars, not lanterns. Something smaller. Alive. They moved like fireflies, but slower. Careful. Watching. They gathered into shapes I almost recognized. Lines, curves, symbols. I stepped closer. The damp earth pressed cold against my shoes. Each footstep made the leaves sigh beneath me. The shapes dissolved instantly, curling into smoke that smelled faintly of ash. The silence returned, heavy, holding its breath. I whispered my own name, and it felt strange, foreign, in the open air. I reached for the light again. It shimmered under my fingers and pulled away like it had a mind of its own. I felt the warmth of it then, soft, electric, almost tender, before it flickered into nothing. Something shifted in the shadows. Not fast, slow, a pause that pressed against the back of my neck. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The forest hummed, a low, constant vibration that I could feel in my chest and under my tongue. It wasn't wind. It wasn't trees. I thought I saw another light further down the path. It blinked once, twice, then a cluster of them appeared, like they had multiplied behind a veil of mist. I tried to step quietly. The leaves crunched anyway. Soft footsteps followed me. Not my own. I want to call out. The word caught in my throat, sour and heavy. The lights twisted again, forming a circle around a tree. I could see their reflection in the wet bark, pale and trembling. I moved closer. The fog wrapped my hands, clinging, cold, damp. Each step felt like stepping into a dream I couldn't wake from. One of the symbols pulsed. Not a glow, not a shadow. A heartbeat, matching mine. I leaned in, breath shallow. The smoke curled around my fingers as if to draw me in. The smell was faint. Smoke, wet moss, something metallic. I wanted to touch it. I wanted to know it. But it vanished. The light scattered. Into nothing. I was alone. Just a fog. The damp earth. The hum lingering like a memory I couldn't place. I thought the forest had exhaled. Or maybe I had. The quiet was thick, almost alive. Then a single light blinked back at me from behind a tree. Small, insistent, not frightening, not friendly. Just waiting. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I only listened. The forest seemed to fold in on itself. Every rustle of leaves became a voice I almost understood. The fog twisted. The shadows leaned closer. And then it was gone. The footlights, the smoke, the hum. Everything that had danced around me vanished, as if it had never existed. I stayed there for a long time, listening to my own heart in the quiet, feeling the chill of the fog settle into my bones. I didn't know if I would see it again, but I knew the memory of the lights would follow me, flickering, just beyond reach, always waiting. The wind came first. Not a chill exactly, but a hollow hum, threading through the branches. It carried voices. I couldn't tell if they were warnings or laughter. Not human, but not entirely. Something else. Each gust bent the trees, twisting them into shapes my eyes refused to leave. The sky was pale, almost washed out like water over paper. Leaves shivered and fell in slow arcs. The ground smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. I stepped forward. Branches reached like fingers, brushing my arms. A rustle behind me made me freeze. I told myself it was only the wind, but then the voices returned. Closer, they pressed at the edges of thought. Tugging at the corners I tried to ignore. A shadow passed across the path. It wasn't the trees. I could feel it in my chest, a light pressure, a subtle vibration under skin. I kept moving, feet crunching on brittle leaves. Every step echoed longer than it should have. The wind shifted, colder now, sharper. It carried something else, something I wanted to name, but the words slid away the moment I tried. A smell, like smoke from wetwood, pushed into my nostrils. I shivered, though I wasn't cold. I paused near a hollow tree. The inside was black, yet I felt eyes, soft, unblinking. A small branch snapped behind me. I turned, slowly. Nothing, just fog curling along the ground, slow and deliberate. The voices rose, layered now, a whisper of many timbers. I thought I caught words, fragments, but they were gone before meaning could form. A warning or a memory or a lie, all of it pressing in with each gust, shaping the night. The trees leaned closer, roots like veins stretched across the earth. I brushed my hand along one, bark rough, warm with some hidden pulse. The wind snuck through the hollow of the trunk. Sighing, it felt alive. Soft footsteps followed me. Not mine, not human. I tried to imagine a creature, but the mind recoiled. Better not to name it. The path split. Fog swallowed the fork in a slow, creeping wave. I hesitated, listening. The voices were all around now, whispering in layers, impossible to separate. I walked, or thought I did. The air thickened. Every breath tasting faintly metallic, a whisper of ash. Branches grazed my face like fingernails, rough and tender at once. A pale light glimmered through the fog. I stepped toward it, feet dragging over wet leaves. The shadow moved with me, always just behind, just outside. I wanted to run. I didn't. The wind hollowed into silence. Even the voices paused, waiting. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and hesitant. A last gust, warm this time, pressed against my skin, carrying something sweet and rotten. Then it was gone. The forest held its breath. Only the fog remained, curling patient. I touched the bark of a tree, rough under my fingers. Soft footsteps faded behind me. I couldn't tell if they had left, or if I had finally stopped noticing. The hollow wind whispered one last time. I didn't understand, and I knew I never would. The air was damp, the ground soft beneath my feet. Late autumn leaves crunched with every step. I was walking along the creek, alone. The water whispered over the stones, slow, constant. A fog clung to the trees, pale and thin, like breath on glass. A small rock caught my eye. It looked ordinary, gray, rough, unnoticed. But then I saw them. Tiny eyes, barely larger than pinpoints, peering from underneath the rock. I froze. The wind brushed my neck, carrying the faint smell of wet earth. A shiver ran down my spine. I knelt slowly, careful not to startle whatever it was. The eyes blinked, just once, and then they were gone. The rock seemed heavier now. I pressed closer, almost touching the damp moss around it. There was a pause, a hush, so sudden it made the creek seem louder, soft rustling from the leaves. A breath that wasn't mine. I leaned closer. The earth smelled cold and sharp like metal. The fog pressed against my face, leaving droplets on my skin. I tried to see where the eyes had gone. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Only the hum of the creek and the occasional crack of a twig. I reached toward the rock, fingers trembling, brushing over the moss. The earth felt strangely warm beneath my hand, as if something waited. Then a movement, quick, subtle under the stone. A tiny shadow slipped back into the soil, leaving no mark, no dirt disturbed, no trace. I pulled my hand away, heart thumping, cold fog in my ears. Saw footsteps, or maybe just the wind, whispering to the branches. I watched for a long time. The rock sat there, still, gray, ordinary, impossible. I tried to convince myself it was imagination. The eyes weren't real. Yet the air felt heavier, thicker. A sense of being watched curled around me. Every sound became sharper. The creek's hum, once soothing, now urgent. The snap of a branch, not behind me, but somewhere close. The brush of air against my cheek, almost deliberate. I knelt again, peered under the stone, empty, and yet I felt it, a presence lingering in the soil, in the shadows cast by the rock, in the pause between my breaths. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed for it, but my eyes kept returning to that small gray shape, so ordinary, so innocent. The fog thickened, the pale light dimmed. Shadows stretched into shapes I didn't want to name. I finally stood, took a step back. The creek whispered, and the leaves rustled again. But the eyes, I could almost feel them watching. Alone, I walked away, the damp earth clinging to my shoes, the cold air pressing against my face. And somewhere under that rock, tiny eyes waited, blinding me with nothing, leaving me with only the memory of their blink. The forest was quiet. A chill lingered under the pines, settling into the damp earth. Fallen leaves pressed against my boots, damp and brittle. The air smelled faintly of moss and something older, something hidden. I found the lake as the sun began to bend low. Its surface lay perfectly still, glassy, almost too smooth. I expected to see the forest in it, but the reflection was wrong. The trees leaned in ways they shouldn't. Their roots tangled like dark veins above the water. Shadows stretched in impossible directions, curling over shapes I didn't recognize. And beneath it all, a pale light shimmered. I knelt at the edge, and the air pressed closer, tighter, as if it wanted me to stay. My fingers skimmed the water, cold, unyielding. Ripples traveled outward, yet the inverted world held fast, untouched. It stared back, and then I saw it, my own reflection, pale and sharp, but not me. It moved while I stayed still, eyes locking onto mine, unblinking, intent. A breath caught in my throat, though I hadn't exhaled. I should have turned away. I should have run. But something heavier than fear kept me there, rooted. I whispered my name. Nothing returned except the rustling of unseen leaves. The reflection tilted its head, mimicking curiosity, but the tilt was wrong, deliberate, mocking. A ripple passed through the water, soft, like silk sliding across skin, and the world above it shifted. The forest behind me seemed further, darker. The wind carried a faint hum, low and vibrating through the bones of my feet. I couldn't tell if it came from the lake or from inside me. I touched my face. The reflection did the same, but its fingers pressed harder, pushing through the surface as if water were thin air. A shiver crawled up my spine, and I realized the reflection could act freely, but I could not. Something moved behind me, subtle, a flicker of shadow between two pines. I turned my head slowly. Nothing, but the smell changed, smoke, wet earth, something metallic. I could feel it pressing into my chest, soft but insistent. The lake whispered, not with words, not with language, but a rhythm in the water, rising and falling, and my heart began to echo it. I wanted to scream, but the sound froze, caught between lips. The reflection leaned closer. Its eyes glinted with a light I did not recognize. They were patient, hungry, and very old. I knelt fully now, trying to touch the surface, to reach through, to pull something back. Fingers broke the glassy tension. The lake shivered. My reflection smiled. Not me. Something else, something pleased. The wind dropped. Everything became impossibly still. The forest above was quiet. Only the lake moved, breathing alive. I saw shapes swimming beneath the surface. Shadows of limbs, of things crouched, their movements careful, waiting. I wanted to back away. My boots sank slightly in the soft mud, but the reflection did not blink. It whispered without voice, and I felt it in my skull. I belong here, and yet I could not leave. Something in the water pulled gentle, like a lullaby twisted into dread. I knelt there as the sun disappeared entirely. Shadows stretched long across the inverted world, curling around shapes I could not name. The hum grew softer. A shiver ran through my arms, my neck, the soles of my feet. I dared a slow step back. The reflection followed, perfectly synchronized now, until it paused. Its lips curled in a smile, faint, and then the surface flattened again. The shadows stayed. The inverted world waited. I did not look back as I walked into the trees, but I could feel it watching, still, its gaze tracing each soft footstep. And when night fell fully, the lake reflected nothing but darkness. Yet I knew it was still there, waiting. The fog clung low to the forest floor. Even the moon seemed hesitant, spilling pale light in hesitant streaks between the trunks. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting leaves, sweet and sour at once. I was alone, though I kept thinking I heard someone breathing behind me. Saw footsteps, or maybe the earth shifting under its own weight. Followed, but when I turned, nothing moved. Just the trees, endless, leaning, listening. And then it began. A laugh, childlike, faint, curling around the trunks, dancing over the moss. Empty. I froze. It didn't come from anywhere. And yet it was everywhere. Above me, below me, between the branches. I couldn't tell if it had moved or if I had. The ground was wet under my shoes. I could feel the cold seep through the thin soles, creeping up my ankles. The fog thickened, swallowing the path I thought I knew. The laugh returned, sharper this time, but distant, as if carried by some wind I couldn't feel. I thought of calling out. My lips parted. Nothing came, only the echo, folding back on itself, curling tighter around the trees. Around me, I stepped forward. Branches scraped my arms like fingernails, wet and rough. The bark smelled like dust and smoke. The laugh? Closer now, or maybe smaller, higher, and trembling. It was a rhythm I could almost follow, but every step erased it, leaving silence and shadow. A twig snapped behind me. I turned. Nothing. The fog was a wall. My chest tightened. Breath shallow. I thought I saw a movement, a blur between the trunks, but the moon shifted and it vanished. The laughter returned. A soft circle, spinning, surrounding me. It wasn't joyful. It was hollow, like wind through a broken building, echoing where children might have played and never left. I tried to run. Feet sank into the wet soil. Cold crept up my spine. The air buzzed, faint, almost like whispering voices brushing past my ears. I wanted to cover my ears, scream, but couldn't. The fog pressed closer. Shapes flickered. Pale light caught on something. Small hands, small faces, glimpsed gone. The laughter slowed, a pattern now, deliberate, as if it were trying to lead me somewhere. I wanted to follow it. I wanted to stop it. I wanted it gone. My legs moved without me thinking. Leaves pressed against my skin, wet, biting. The trees leaned in, and I could almost feel their breath, faint, musty. The laughter swelled, then scattered, echoing in a dozen impossible directions at once. Then it stopped, abrupt, nothing but the fog and my shallow breath. I could hear my heartbeat, heavy, uneven, in the silence. I thought I'd lost it. I thought it had left. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, pale, small, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. I blinked, gone, and then the faintest laugh, barely there, not circling, not chasing, just waiting. I knelt to steady myself on the wet earth. The cold bit through my palms. The smell of damp leaves and smoke was stronger now, heavier. I felt eyes, countless tiny eyes, watching from somewhere deep in the fog. The laughter softened, folding into the hush of the forest. It wasn't chasing anymore. It wasn't circling. It was patient, empty. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The fog pressed in. The shadow lingered. I waited, too, and listened for the softest footsteps, for the hollow wind of a child who never left, for the laughter that might never come again, or that might never stop. I don't remember leaving the forest, but I know I did. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. Far off, fragile, and hollow, the distant laughter. The path was narrow, overgrown. Mist clung to my ankles, curling into the hollows of my shoes. Even the trees seemed still, waiting. Lanterns hung from branches. Not a single breeze stirred. They swung gently, as if breathing. The glow was soft, pale, but within it, shapes flickered. Faces brief and fleeting, vanishing before I could focus. I paused. The damp earth pressed into my palms as I crouched. A faint rustle followed, yet no wind moved the leaves. Steps behind me, soft, then silence. I held my breath. They moved again, careful, deliberate. A lantern tilted, spilling light across something I couldn't name. Eyes glimmered where bark should have been. I turned, but the shadows swallowed the shapes before I could trace them. The air thickened, carrying a smell like wet paper and smoke. Each step forward left it heavier. I could feel it pressing into my chest, slowing my breath. A hum began, low and wavering, almost inside my head. I tried to step back, but the ground beneath had changed, mud, then stone, then nothing. My foot caught on roots that weren't there before. One lantern hung closest. Its light caught on the curve of a face. I blinked, and it was gone. Another swung into view. Another face, smaller, pressed at the corners of the glow. I whispered my own name. No one answered, but somewhere, beyond the trees, another voice repeated it. Soft, fractured like glass brushing against glass. I leaned closer to the lanterns. Cold metal bit my fingers. The glow pulsed. Shapes multiplied, layered atop one another, watching, waiting. A branch creaked overhead. It could have been my imagination. But then, a shadow fell across the path, wider than any tree could cast. I froze. Footsteps, not mine, closed now, circling, careful. Yet when I spun, the path behind was empty. The lanterns dimmed one by one. Silence pressed its weight against my ears. I realized I hadn't breathed for several long moments. A soft wind, barely a sigh, drifted through. It carried with it 1,000 tiny faces, vanishing before I could see them. My hands shook. My legs felt thin, waterlogged, as if the earth itself had turned to fog. I reached for the last lantern. Its light flickered like a heartbeat. And in that pulse, I saw them all, watching, waiting, patient. The glow faded. The path was gone. I stood alone in a clearing that should not exist. Cold pressed into my shoulders, settling like a blanket I could not lift. I walked forward, or perhaps backward. I could no longer tell. The lanterns did not return. The faces did not follow. Only the hum lingered, low inside my chest, inside my head. And I understood that the path, the lanterns, they were patient, always waiting for the next steps, the next breath, the next name whispered into the fog. The fog wrapped the forest in a pale, trembling light. Every tree leaned close, their branches scratching soft patterns across the ground. Damp earth pressed against my boots. I saw them first. Footprints. They appeared out of the mist, scattered like secrets. Some were human, ordinary, but others, something was wrong. Too long, too narrow, too many toes. The shapes twisted in ways that shouldn't exist. I followed, almost without thinking. The fog seemed thicker here, curling around my shoulders, whispering against my skin. Each step sank into cold mud, each breath heavy and wet. The prints shifted direction suddenly. Left, then right, then forward again. I felt pulled, a soft insistence in the fog, like a finger brushing my neck. I couldn't stop. Leaves rustled behind me. But when I turned, nothing moved. Only the footprints stretched onward, deeper into darkness. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though no fire burned nearby. It burned my nose, sweet and acrid. I crouched to look closer. A toe, thin, elongated, almost translucent. It trembled against the earth, though I knew it had been there for hours. I traced a finger along the edge of the print, mud clinging coldly. The imprint pulsed, a heartbeat beneath my touch. Mist coiled around my ankles now. The forest floor glistened with dew. Something shifted in the fog, a shadow that moved opposite my own. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, but it watched. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, a dog, maybe, but the next footprint disproved that. It had too many toes, too small, and arranged strangely like hands flattened against stone. The path stretched onward, daring me. A branch snapped. Not far, but not near either. My heart caught in my chest. I froze, listening. The fog was a soft hum now, pressing against my ears, vibrating along my bones. The footprints veered again. I hesitated, feeling a cold pulse in the soles of my feet. The forest seemed empty, yet alive. I could smell something faintly metallic, iron and wet, lingering in the mist. Soft whispers brushed past my cheeks. I couldn't make out words, only the cadence, slipping, retreating, returning. Each time I blinked, the prints had moved subtly, though I knew I hadn't. The fog thinned briefly, revealing a small clearing. Pale light flickered through skeletal branches. And there they were, more prints, circling a hollow, where the earth sank slightly, dark and wet. I knelt, touched the mud. It was warm now, sticky, as if breathing under my fingers. A soft vibration traveled up my arm. I pulled back quickly. The footprints had shifted again. Closer, around me now, circling in silence. I whispered, though no one was there. "Who?" No answer came. Then I saw it, my own footprints, trailing into the fog, but longer, thinner, wrong. I stared at them, heart hammering, breath shallow. They weren't mine. Or maybe they were. The fog pressed closer, cold and damp. I could feel eyes crawling across my skin. Soft footsteps echoed, though no one approached. The clearing faded. The trees leaned in. I turned to leave. The path back had vanished. Only footprints remained, stretching endlessly, deeper into the fog. I didn't move. Couldn't. The forest waited, silent, watching. I took a breath, a step, and another, but the prints followed. The fog lingered low over the field. Night pressed in, heavy and still. I could barely see the shapes of the other trees, but one stood apart. It was massive, an old oak. Its branches gnarled like arthritic fingers. The moonlight fell pale and uneven across its bark. At first, I thought it was a wind. The bark, it shivered, a subtle, almost imperceptible swell, like lungs, expanding, contracting. I stepped closer. The air smelled damp, mossy, and faintly of something older, hidden beneath soil. Each step made the grass whisper. Soft footsteps over frozen blades. I reached out. My fingers brushed the bark. It moved beneath me, slow, deliberate. A heartbeat pressed against my palm, slow, steady, not mine. I pulled back. My own chest felt tight. The pulse seemed to sink into me, into the bones beneath my skin. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. A rustling came from high above. Leaves whispered against each other. Or maybe something whispered through them. A hollow hum, like air trapped inside an enormous chest. I traced the knots of the tree with trembling fingers. They seemed to throb, thick veins under bark, rising and falling. Alive, watching, waiting. A sudden wind nudged the branches. A shadow flickered across the ground. It wasn't my shadow. It stretched, twisted, reaching toward me like dark water pooling at my feet. I tried to step back. My foot caught a root. The heartbeat grew louder, deeper. It filled my ears, my chest, my mind. I could feel it in my teeth, vibrating along the marrow. I bent close. The bark pressed against my cheek. Cold, damp, yet beneath it, warmth. Slow, steady warmth. Breathing. I realized I could almost hear it thinking. A pattern, quiet and methodical. A soft pull, like the tide beneath my ribs. Then the leaves above me stilled. The hum ceased. Only my ragged breath remained. Or was it theirs? I could no longer tell. I stepped away. My fingers left the bark, but the pulse lingered, a memory of it pressed into my skin. I felt the tree behind me, waiting, patient, quiet. The field had fallen completely silent. Mist swirled around my ankles. Each step home echoed, too loud, too exposed. I could still feel the heartbeat in the soles of my feet. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. But I know it watched. The massive oak, breathing softly in the night, alive and remembering me. The road home seemed longer than before. Every shadow stretched, hesitated, then followed. I could hear leaves, rustling just out of reach. The air smelled faintly of damp moss and something older, something waiting. I reached the edge of the field. The fog thinned. The heartbeat, it stopped, or perhaps I just stopped hearing it. But even now, when the night is quiet and the wind shifts, I swear I feel it beneath my skin. Slow, steady, not mine. The air was thick with mist that night. Cold droplets clung to my coat. Each step on the damp grass whispered underfoot. I stopped at the edge of clearing. The shack leaned crooked. It was grayed with rot. A single window stared at me. Inside, something flickered. A pale, trembling light that made the shadows dance. It wasn't bright enough to see clearly, but enough to feel watched. I stepped closer. The boards beneath my boots groaned. The smell of wet earth and decay clung to my nose. The wind sighed through the cracks, low and mournful. The flicker moved. Or maybe I moved. I could feel my pulse against the thin fog, soft, frantic, shallow. It was only a shape. I couldn't tell if it was human or not. The window shivered with a reflection of my own pale face, and for a heartbeat, it seemed to recoil. I held my breath. The light vanished. The silence pressed against my ears, thick and heavy. I leaned closer. The wood was rough under my fingers, Cool, damp, splintered. The air inside smelled of smoke long dead, and something else, metallic, coppery, faint. A shadow flinched. I froze. I wanted to speak, but the word stuck, swallowed by the cold. The flicker returned, now at the far corner of the room, dancing across broken floorboards. It made the peeling wallpaper twitch, like a heartbeat in the dark. I imagined a face there, eyes hollow, staring back. But the shape dissolved as soon as I tried to focus, leaving only the faintest drift of movement, a rhythm like slow breathing. The night wrapped itself around me, fog curling into my hair, my sleeves, my skin. Soft rustling at the edge of the clearing made me turn. Nothing, only the sound of my own pulse and the whisper of wind. I pressed my hand to window. Cold glass met warm skin. A shiver ran down my spine. The flicker answered. Just a twitch, a pause, a hollow echo in the dark. I thought about leaving. The shack was empty, I told myself. But the shadows seemed to linger, coiled in the corners, waiting. For a long moment, I stared. The world fell away. The light faded. I imagined the shadows stepping forward, sliding between walls, quiet as the fog. The wind shifted. It carried a faint hum, like voices trapped beneath the floorboards. I could feel it in my teeth, in the tips of my fingers, and the cold pressing against my chest. The window went dark, and then I heard it. Soft footsteps, not outside, but behind a thin wall of splintered wood. I blinked. The air was still. The shack waited, silent. The mist swallowed the clearing, and I walked away. But the flicker, a pale pulse behind that lonely window, stayed with me. A memory of movement, of breath, of something just beyond the reach of sight. I didn't look back. I kept walking. The clearing disappeared into fog. But in the quiet of night, I could still feel it, watching. The forest smelled damp, like earth and old rain. A pale light seeped between the trees, soft, hesitant. The trail beneath my boots was quiet, almost too quiet. I thought I saw someone ahead. A hiker, maybe, but the leaves didn't stir beneath their feet. I called out, my voice swallowed by the thick air. No response, just the hum of the wind in the branches. They shifted, or maybe it was only a shadow. I blinked, and they were gone. The trail narrowed, winding between ancient trunks. Every snap of a twig made me flinch. I could feel the stillness pressing closer, wrapping around my chest. I caught a glimpse again. A figure, thin and pale, moving against the curve of the path. I tried to follow, stepping carefully over roots and stones. But it was like chasing smoke. The fog thickened. It clung to my legs, whispered at my ears. And then I realized there was still no sound. No crunch of leaves, no rustle of fabric. Only the faint pulse of my own heartbeat. I slowed, paused. Even my breath seemed loud. A breeze brushed my cheek. I felt the cold where it touched me, smelled wet pine in the air. I spun around. Nothing. Something shifted behind a trunk, a tilt of a head, pale against the dim light. I called again, my voice trembling. Still nothing. The path curved, and for a moment, I thought I'd lost it. But there it was, standing where the trail forked, motionless, closer now, though it had never made a sound. I stepped forward. The air grew heavier. Every step seemed to echo in the fog, yet it stayed impossibly silent. I wanted to run. My skin prickled, hairs on my arms lifting, but the figure didn't move toward me. It just watched, or seemed to, from somewhere in the mist. The forest felt deeper here, denser. Shadows pooled beneath the trees, darkening the ground. I thought I saw something brush past my shoulder. A whisper, soft, or maybe it was only the wind. I blinked again. The hiker, or whatever it was gone. Nothing left but a trail of still leaves. Not even footprints. The silence lingered. I couldn't hear birds, couldn't hear my own steps properly. Even the distant stream sounded muffled, like it had been swallowed. I kept walking, slow, careful. The path curved again, leading me toward pale light breaking through canopy. And in that light, I thought I caught a last glimpse. A figure turned slightly, pale and watching. Then it was gone. The trail was empty. Only fog, only shadows, only the soft, pressing hum of the forest. I didn't hear footsteps again. I didn't call out. I only walked, and the forest seemed to breathe around me. Quiet, patient, watching. The night had a weight to it. A fog thick as will press against my skin. I could barely see the street lamp down the block. Its light pale, swallowed almost entirely. Each step I took felt heavy, wet with dew I couldn't see. The fog carried a silence that hummed in my ears, as though the world itself had paused, holding its breath. Shapes flickered just beyond my vision. A tree twisted, limbs bending where they shouldn't, or maybe it was my mind shaping shadows into impossible things. I felt a hand brush my shoulder. Cold, light, fleeting. I spun. Nothing. Nothing but the fog. The air smelled damp metallic, like wet stone and rust. My shoes pressed into the softened earth. Each step muffled, swallowed. A whisper of movement behind me. I froze. Saw footsteps or maybe the fog shifting. But I could swear someone, or something, was following. My chest rose quickly. Breath caught in my throat. The fog clung to my clothes, to my hair, making every movement slow, deliberate, like swimming through syrup. Shapes hovered, blurring into one another. A lamppost, a mailbox, the outline of figure. Then gone. I blinked, and the world had moved a fraction. The fog thickened, pressing closer. The brush of fingers, again lighter this time, grazed my arm. I turned sharply. Nothing, only the fog, whispering against my skin. A faint rustling came from all around. Leaves, perhaps, or fabric, shifting, scraping along an invisible wall. I tried to call out. My voice was swallowed, the words lost inside the gray. I felt exposed, alone, though the fog promised presence. It carried shape and shadow that belonged to no one, and I could not escape its silent hold. Light flickered in the distance, or maybe it was my eyes straining, shapes dancing in and out of the mist. A street lamp? A window? I could not tell. A cold breeze, sharp like a sigh across my neck. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around my shoulders. The fog felt alive, coiling, drifting as if it knew my fear. I stumbled forward. Soft thuds, like bare feet on wet earth, echoed behind me. I dared not look back. Each heartbeat felt enormous, loud in the muffled world. A shadow leaned closer. Not human, not animal. Something hollow, reaching, its edges blurred by the dense gray. I wanted to run. The fog resisted, folding around my legs, slowing me, swallowing my path. The street ended abruptly. The fog clung to me, tight, intimate, like hands pressed across my chest. I closed my eyes. A sound, low and distant, almost a sigh. When I opened them, I was alone. The shapes had vanished. The fog thinned, though it never fully left. I could feel it, lingering, soft against my skin, whispering with the night. I walked on. The world felt pale, empty, quiet. But I knew the fog had marked me, and somewhere inside its gray embrace, something had watched me, and would watch again. The night was thick with fog. Each tree loomed like a dark sentinel. The forest smelled of damp earth and old pine. I walked slowly, boots sinking into the soft soil. A faint glow appeared ahead, flickering through the mist. A campfire, small and alone, pulsed like a heartbeat in the clearing. Shadows moved around it, pale and shifting. They were not people, not entirely, more like echoes bending and leaning toward the fire. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. The warmth barely reached me, but the hum in the air felt alive. Whispers curled between the trunks, low and patient, threading around the fog and my pulse. I wanted to turn back. The trees whispered encouragement, too, but the fire called louder. Something brushed past my shoulder, a soft rustle. No shape followed, only the echo of movement and the faint smell of smoke, tangy metallic, like it had known my name long before I arrived. I took a step forward. Another shadow bent closer to flames. I could see the outlines of faces, or the memory of them, not solid, but knowing, watching. The whispers grew, curling into words I almost recognized. I leaned closer, heart tight and heavy, but my throat went dry. Each syllable promised comfort and danger all at once. A branch cracked underfoot. and the shadows jerked, then settled like they had never moved. The firelight flickered across hollow eyes, and I realized the smoke wasn't drifting. It was reaching. I wanted to run. My feet froze in mud and cold. Something slid across my skin, like a breath that didn't belong to me. I forced my eyes on the fire. It wasn't fire anymore, just a thin circle of pale light hovering in the mist. The whispers softened, shifting into a lullaby that scraped the inside of my skull. I remembered every campfire I had ever sat around. Each one warm, safe, laughing. This one was older than the stars, older than the trees, older than me. The shadows circled tighter, not threatening, more patient. They mirrored my movements, mirrored my hesitation, my fear, my quiet surrender. I realized then that staying meant losing myself, not in pain, not in terror, but in quiet dissolution, slipping into the whispers and smoke and never noticing the difference between my breath and the breath of the fire. I took one last look. The glow pulsed once, softly. It was an invitation, a promise. And then I stepped back. The mist swallowed me, the whispers curling after, but I moved through them, each step heavier than the last. The clearing receded. The fire shrank into a pale dot. The shadows melted into nothing. I was alone again, cold, damp, and trembling. The forest held its breath. The fog wrapped around me, and I kept walking away from the glow, away from the voices that almost knew me better than I knew myself. And yet, in the quietest corner of my mind, I could still feel the fire's pull. Like a memory I would never fully forget. The fog pressed close around me. It curled through the trees, pale and damp. Even the ground felt softer than usual, muffled underfoot. My breath came uneven, in and out, a rhythm too loud in the quiet. I thought the forest was empty, but the stillness had weight. It pressed against my ears, thick and patient. The trunks rose like silent pillars, their bark rough, cold under my fingertips. Leaves shivered, though no wind stirred. I walked slowly. Each step sunk into wet moss, leaving soft impressions. Behind me, nothing moved. Or maybe everything moved, just out of sight. The air smelled of damp wood and decay. A faint sweetness lingered, almost like the memory of flowers. It made my chest tighten. I paused. The silence felt older than me, older than the fog. It carried a waiting I could not name. Branches reached overhead, tangled, shadowed. A soft scrape, high above, made my skin prickle. It was too deliberate to be the wind. I pressed my hand to a tree. Its roughness grounded me. The bark pulsed faintly beneath my palm, alive in a way that wasn't wind or heart. Shadows pulled around roots, curling like dark water. I thought I saw them shift when I blinked, just for a moment. Breath shallow, I continued. Each step crunched faintly. The forest absorbed it, letting it linger, echo, and fade. I realized I was being watched, not by eyes, but by patience, by stillness stretched over centuries. A rustling, closer this time, but nothing appeared, just the fog, the trunks, and my own uneasy pulse. I sat on a fallen log. The moss clung damp to my jeans, and I listened. The silence answered. It did not judge. It waited. I noticed small details. A leaf quivering as if it knew me. A branch bending, too heavy with quiet. A scent of something old and metallic in the air. Time blurred. Minutes stretched. Hours could have passed. I could not tell. I breathed in rhythm with the forest. Slow, steady. It was easier to move, easier to exist. I realized the trees had always been watching. Patient, still, eternal. And I was alone. But alone was different here. It was not empty. It was full of waiting, of soft breathing, of life that did not speak. I lay back against the damp log. Branches above swayed faintly, like a lullaby. Fog crept around me, soft and cold, and I accepted it. The forest did not demand. It only held me in its quiet, and in that silence, I almost felt safe. The wind finally stirred. A leaf brushed my cheek. Soft footsteps, not mine, passed nearby, but I did not move. I could stay like this forever, just breathing, just listening, alone among trees.